Hey, it's Dan Zimmerman. Welcome to Illustrate to Educate. Don't forget to like and subscribe to support more simple and objective videos on topics that matter. Have you ever wondered what the Korean conflict between North and South Korea is all about? In this video, we'll take a look at some of the most important details you should know. First, let's look at a very brief history of the Korean Peninsula. In 1392, the Korean Peninsula was a united territory under the Joseon dynasty starting from 1392. But in 1910, Japan annexed Korea and remained under Japanese rule for 35 years until 1945. During this time, Japanese rule did not allow the teaching of Korean history and language, and the Japanese language was expected to be used. Industries such as farming were directed to fulfill the demands of Japan. So why did the split of the Korean Peninsula happen? On August 9, 1945, as agreed by the Allies at the Yalta Conference, the Soviet Union declared war on Japan and advanced into Korea. The US government requested that the Soviet advance stop at the 38th parallel. The US forces were to occupy the area south of the 38th parallel, including the capital Seoul. When Japan announced its surrender on August 15th, Korea was divided into two zones of occupation. On the 24th of August, the Soviet Union Army entered Pyongyang and established a military government over Korea north of the parallel. American forces landed in the south on September 8th and established the U.S. Army military government in Korea south of the 38th parallel. A plan was envisioned to move toward an independent Korea. However, wartime cooperation between the Soviet Union and the U.S. deteriorated as the Cold War took hold. Both occupying powers began promoting Koreans into positions of authority that aligned with their side of politics and diminished their opponents. In North Korea, the Soviet Union supported Korean communist Kim Il-sung, who from 1941 had served in the Soviet Army and became a major political figure. Society in the North was centralized and collectivized, following the Soviet model. Politics in the South were more rough, but the strongly anti-communist Syngham Rhee, who had been educated in the US, was the most prominent politician. In May 1948, a general election was held and the Republic of Korea, or ROK, was established with Syngham Rhee as president and formally replaced the US military occupation on August 25th. On September 9th, in North Korea, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, or DPRK, was established with Kim Il-sung as prime minister. Soviet occupation forces left the DPRK on December 10, 1948, and U.S. forces left the ROK the following year. As they do to this day, both governments consider themselves to be the government of the whole Korean peninsula, and both saw the division as temporary. Kim Il-sung lobbied Stalin and Mao for support in a war of reunification, while Syngham Rhee repeatedly expressed his desire to conquer the North. In 1948, North Korea, which had almost all of the generators, turned off the electricity supply to the south. In the lead-up to the outbreak of civil war, there were frequent clashes along the 38th parallel, initiated by both sides. Throughout this period, there were uprisings in the south that were brutally suppressed. In all, over 100,000 lives were lost in fighting across Korea before the Korean War began. By 1950, North Korea had clear military superiority over South Korea. The Soviet occupiers had armed it with surplus weaponry and provided training. Many troops returning to North Korea were battle-hardened from their participation in the Chinese Civil War, which had just ended. Kim Il-sung expected a quick victory, predicting that there would be a pro-communist uprising in the South and that the U.S. would not intervene. Rather than perceiving the conflict as a civil war, however, the West saw it in Cold War terms as communist aggression related to recent events in China and Eastern Europe. North Korea invaded the South on June 25, 1950, and swiftly overran most of the country. In September of 1950, United Nations forces from 15 nations, led by the US, intervened to defend the South, rapidly advancing into North Korea. As the UN forces neared the border with China, Chinese forces intervened on behalf of North Korea, shifting the balance of the war again. On July 27, 1953, the fighting ended with an armistice that approximately restored the original boundaries between North and South Korea and created the demilitarized zone, a heavily guarded border along the 38th parallel. In the Korean War, about 3 million civilians and soldiers had been killed. Seoul was in ruins, having changed hands 4 times. Almost every substantial building in North Korea had been destroyed and several million North Korean refugees fled to the south. Korea has failed to reunite due to intervention by superpowers or the Korean War. Tensions between North and South Korea continued for decades during and beyond the Cold War era, with a series of low-level armed clashes, assassination attempts, and overall unrest. Today, North Korea and South Korea are not only separated politically and geographically, but almost 7 decades of separation has turned them into different worlds. South Korea is among the trillion-dollar economies, while North's population still survives on aid. The two nations have different citizen rights, laws and order, economies, societies, and daily life. Recent events include concerns over North Korea's nuclear readiness, which has been a rising concern over the past 5 years, to fire tactical nuclear warheads to potential targets in South Korea. In response, the US, Japanese, and South Korean warships have been performing missile defense exercises. Some believe that Kim Jong-un is feeling emboldened by Putin, who is using threats of tactical nukes to turn around battleground setbacks in Ukraine. What are your thoughts on the Korean conflict? If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to Illustrate to Educate to support more simple and objective videos on topics that matter. If you liked this video, check out more of my videos to the right.